Hello, Steve White, Checkboy89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, I finally watched a film I've put off watching for 15 years, Fanboys. Now, why didn't I want to watch this back in the day? Well, because I'd heard the portrayal of Star Trek fans was pretty offensive. And if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, you know just how much Star Trek fans and Star Wars fans hated each other. And it was pretty brutal back then. Um, and I felt like this film perpetuated that, so I really just wasn't at all interested in seeing it. Looked okay in the trailers and everything, but unfortunately, I found it on 7 Plus or one of the seven streaming channels for free. So I thought, I'll watch it. It wasn't that bad. I mean, the portrayal of Star Trek fans was offensive. It was cheap. They didn't even pay for the costumes or any of the licensing, so they're wearing costumes that it's basically like a Star Trek Discovery production where nothing looks right, the costumes aren't right, because they didn't pay for the actual proper licensing. So it's pretty lame and insulting and offensive and weird, so far as how Star Trek fans are treated. And there is a little joke and a betrayal by William Shatner, in some ways, by appearing in the film, but he always hated Star Trek fans, and I've met him in person. He's a complete a-hole, so I'm not surprised there. The film itself was funnier than I thought. It had a few jokes that, of course, I got because I'm not a big Star Wars fan. I'm a science fiction fan, a Star Trek fan, and a science fiction fan, and Star Wars is just part of science fiction. Um, and like I watched at least Jedi on TV when I was a kid. I rented or borrowed the films when they were released in THX sound, remastered in widescreen and everything. I watched them in the mid 90s, and then I went to see the special editions, was shocked by the Muppets and so forth, and the lack of the JJ monster in the desert and everything, like most people. And then I waited like everyone else to see Phantom Menace and was just waiting like everyone else. And I remember that time. That was probably the most interesting part of it, is just remembering that time and remembering opening night. I mean, I didn't sleep out in a tent, but my friend from uni and her friend did go with one of their friends, and we all went together and waited in line for hours, and we only just got literally one of the last tickets for the first screening of that night. And I ended up in the worst seat I've ever had for a film in my life, which was the very front row, but on the very end on the side. So the whole film was like this, and like one end of the image was that big and the other end was like that. It was awful. But the film was okay, but it wasn't great. And that was the funny thing, because back then we thought it sucked. We didn't know suck until we got to, the JJ Disney version of Star Wars, which is basically just regurgitating the original but destroying everything great about it, just to try and sell the same product, basically, which is... I remember sitting in the audience going, like, just wait a minute, did that... No, I can't even... No, I'm not even going there. But, yeah, this film, they do show the final night, the opening night and everything, and it was... I felt a good sort of... They really captured, I think, the spirit and the sort of time. It was interesting on that level. But the Star Trek jokes were just... Yeah. So the film basically is about a bunch of nerds who have been separated by, growing up. One of them basically took a real job and abandoned his dreams of being a cartoonist and everything. And he bumps into his friends on Halloween, his ex-friends on Halloween, doing their usual Star Wars costume stuff. And eventually one of them tells him that his friend has cancer. So he doesn't have long to live. And they have this idea to break into the Skywalker Ranch to see episode 1, because their friend is not going to live long enough for the release, because they're doing the countdown and everything. So they set off on a road trip, and it's reasonably funny. There's a few jokes along the way that are pretty decent. They of course take a side trek through I think, is it Riverdale or Riverside? I think it's Riverside, where Captain Kirk was born, just so they can hassle some Trekkies and knock down the Captain Kirk statue and everything. And it's just, But eventually they end up in Vegas and things go really wrong. They end up fighting with other Trekkies and fighting with other people, and eventually they do finally get the plans, basically. the secret sort of IDs and the maps and everything, and to get into Skywalker Ranch and to be able to find what they need when they get in there, and who is handing them to them. But of course, William Shatner, because he's William Shatner, he can get anything. So that was funny, and Carrie Fisher appeared as a nurse, and the kid actually gets to kiss her when they leave and everything. And there are a few little good moments in it, a few good jokes. The ending's a little sad because, of course, they jump forward. What happens basically, they get caught, but George Lucas, in his infinite humanity, basically says, you can stay and watch the film, the kid who actually has cancer. So, I don't know, we know with fans that happened a few times with some films, like even the JJ Star Trek 2009 film. There was a couple of people who weren't going to make that film that got to see it early. And also because the film got delayed 6 months, they also did that. So that was very touching. And then they jump to the opening night and they're there without their friend. And that's when we get the funniest line of the whole film, the biggest joke, because the joke ultimately was on Star Wars fans. When he turns to his friends, after all that, he says, "What if it sucks?" That was the best. That was the best thing, being a Star Trek fan, having Star Wars Episode 1 suck so bad and have Star Wars fans get so excited and then so let down and broken down. It really, really was brilliant and beautiful until, of course, Discovery came and, we got our karma. So yeah, the film was okay. I mean, it would have been more interesting if they'd done a realistic portrayal of Star Trek fans and the actual conflict and that. It would have been more interesting than this weird Star Trek Rebels, Discovery sort of Discovery verse version of these Star Trek fans with the wrong uniforms and the wrong symbols and the wrong colours, and everything has to be different because of copyright and all that. But yeah, overall the film was good. It had a good heart. It was funny in parts. There are bits that I wasn't expecting to be good in that, and I'm glad I finally watched it. I'm not sure we have the equivalent. We've got there's Spaceballs and Fanboys, and then we've got the two Trekkies documentaries and Galaxy Quest. So we've got real life documentaries about fans, and then this really, really science fiction sort of version that looks sort of a Star Trek that looks at the fans and fandom and that. So between all of those, sort of Star Trek and Star Wars have been covered, so far as the fandoms and everything. But I'd like to see just a regular Star Trek film about Star Trek fans having some sort of Star Trek experience or similar sort of pilgrimage. I know there is the film about the girl with autism, which I still haven't seen, but I think that's it. I can't think of any other sort of equivalent films. So I think Star Trek needs a film about Star Trek, because I think that was more about autism and less about the fandom. Like I said, Trekkies was actually, a documentary, so it's not quite the same. And I was nearly in Trekkies too. Unfortunately, I went to the Austrek meeting after Denise was there. I'm pretty sure if I'd mentioned that I had 1,000 trebles at home, they would have come around with their cameras, and I would have been in the video sitting in doing that Kirk shot, recreating the Kirk shot. I'm sure that's what would have happened, but I'm kind of glad it didn't, because I really don't want to waste my 15 minutes of fame, which I'm sure is still coming, on a couple of minutes in Trekkies too. But it would have been nice to have met Denise. I still haven't met her. She's one of the few Star Trek. She's one of the only members of the Next Generation cast I haven't met. I haven't met Harry Kim, I haven't met Tasha Yar, and I haven't met Guinan. But I was never expecting to meet Guinan, and it killed me. I nearly went to Las Vegas 50 or whatever it was, and I thought, there's no point. You've met everyone. The only people that you haven't met are Kirstie Alley and Whoopi Goldberg, and they're never going to come to a convention, and they both went to that convention. Killed me. And then Kirstie Alley turned into a Trump supporter and died, so she's better off now. And Whoopi Goldberg, I guess there's still hope I could meet her. But I hear she's a total a-hole, so I'm kind of happy if I don't, because at least I can just imagine she would have been nice. She's a total alpha, rude, cranky old woman is what I'm hearing, but that could just be from right-wing people that hate her because she's left. Who knows? Who knows in this world what's what anymore? Everything's tribal. And I think, oddly enough, the whole Star Trek and Star Wars sort of conflict was sort of a precursor for that, and this film is an example of that. And it was a horrible time to live through. I was a member of the Austrek fan club, which is the second oldest Star Trek fan club in the world. And they had members of Star Walking, which is the big Star Wars fan club in Australia. We did get along. We did do stuff together. We did have sort of share conventions and share events and charity things and stuff like that. So we managed to get to a sort of a place of peace. I think after the Star Wars fans had been humbled by episode 1, you know, they pulled their heads in a bit and we sort of made peace. And I don't know where it stands now post-Discovery, because I left the fandom after the JJ films because certain people sold out the fans so they could get interviews with the cast and stuff like that. But yeah, no names. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think, and I'll cover all that in another video one day.